Welcome to the Torvus podcast. My name is Ari, and this is episode 9. In episode 9, we're going to be focusing on the best monsters in fiction. Jason, Alex, and I will run down who we think, or what we think, is the most influential monsters in movies, fiction, writing, and general history. So stay tuned. Let's get into it. Gentlemen, welcome to episode 9 of the Torvus podcast. We have a good one tonight, don't we? We got some craziness. So this whole episode is actually going to be focusing, as I said, on our top 10 quote-unquote monsters, give or take, of fiction, movies, television. I think what we need to do is, the whole episode is going to basically be a Dane's Dungeon. Because we're talking about, what we think is cool and what we think is bull. And so it's really, the whole episode will be dedicated to the Dane's Dungeon of cool shit, bullshit, and our top monsters. So we're going to get into it, and hopefully some of the listening audience, you've never heard of these before, and it will kind of trigger you to check them out, read the literature, or check out the movies and things like that. So I'm going to start today. We're just going to dive right in. I think I'm going to start probably at the top of my quote-unquote list. And that list is, we're going to talk about the xenomorph alien from the Alien franchise. Alien. And there has been many different versions of the alien that have come out, obviously, in different types of film. But we're talking about the original film and the follow-up film, which is Aliens, and the monster itself. And I chose the xenomorph because, obviously, it is the ultimate killing machine. It doesn't have weapons, doesn't need tools.
It is a weapon.
Yeah, and the history of it, as you go on and you watch Prometheus and Covenant and stuff, it kind of goes into the backstory of how they've come into being. But the original Alien, when it came out, it was one alien on a ship, and it ends up taking out everyone on the ship.
Yep.
And, acid for blood, and just an amazing monster.
What I think is its greatest attribute is the intelligence and the fast learning. It kind of seems to almost instinctually evolve its own instincts. It instantly learns, adapts, reacts very quickly. It's like almost a supercomputer in its own head.
Just insane cunning.
Yeah.
And it kind of has that, that hive mentality like an insect, but super cunning, you're right.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things of the alien that I kind of looked up today was, how does an alien see?
Because it doesn't have eyes.
Or does it?
So
if you look at the original drawings of H.R. Geiger, he actually drew the alien, and then he drew the skull of the alien. Mm-hmm. And if you take away kind of that dome in front, it actually has a human skull with eye sockets. So one of the theories is it's like a two-way mirror. You can't see in, but it can actually see out.
Didn't they have an earlier version that had more eye-like eyes, and then they changed it?
Oh, you mean, yeah, they did.
Because, part of the original design was when he was working on Dune, the Dune movie that never got made. We'll have to do a whole episode on that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those designs came from there, and then they evolved into the alien.
And I think one of the things they talk about the alien of being, the reason it can hunt and stuff like that is it hunts by pheromone. Its mouth within a mouth is kind of testing the air like a snake. Mm-hmm. The snake has something called the Jacobson's organ, which basically it senses the air, tastes it, and it can tell you where heat signatures are. That's how it works. So maybe like that. But I definitely think the alien has to be in there of one of the greatest monsters of all time, for the sheer fact of how it comes into being, the chest bursters, that it impregnates you, like horrible imagery, right?
What also is brilliant about it is it literally from alien to alien, from each generation, whatever its host is, it accepts probably the best attributes of its hosts.
Yeah.
As it changes. So as throughout the films as they go on, infect different things. In Aliens, it's the dog, and then
Right.
so you see the faster, kind of more hunched over one, and and there's the evolution that, and
Yeah.
then when you later find out as you watch Prometheus and Covenant that it's a weapon of mass destruction,
Right.
and that's the key, the trigger is that it's always changing, always advancing, learning, just to
Yeah, it's got an evolutionary life cycle.
to kill,
built
kill,
in.
kill, right?
The really crazy thing about the alien, the xenomorph itself, is like when it talks about the acid for blood, when it gets cut, it burns through bulkheads and stuff like that. Like,
What was the first? It went through like 3 decks or something in the first one. It went.
which is really funny because in the movie, like a couple of them get sprayed and they're like, whoa! Like
Yeah.
if it's burning through metal like that, it would just burn through your head and you'd be dead in like a second,
yeah.
right? But very cool. So let's have a vote here. Would we say that the xenomorph tops or is on the list of one of the coolest monsters?
It's on a top 10 list. It was on my list as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd say it's like if we're duking it out battle royale arena, I'd
Yep.
say it comes in a very close second to my first choice.
Which is what?
Dragons,
Okay. Go ahead. Ball's in your court.
wings, literally death on wings. You know what I mean? They range in shape, size, every culture, every aspect of humanity. They all have some form of dragon, and we get the dragons that breathe fire. They breathe lightning. Some of them are primal beasts. Some of them are intelligent, sort of lighthouse keepers that keep to themselves and guard treasure, or they represent the worst parts of humanity: greed. Some of them are smart. They help people out. They're just. The dragon myth is just an incredible one that has been around since I think people have been telling stories. They've come up with this winged beast in the sky, and a zone that we don't know, similar to the aliens in space, but we're talking about a creature that is just. The only way that people are killing dragons is, the knight goes and rescues the princess. He's the 111th knight who happened to do it at exactly 3:30 p.m. and the dragon was tired and he stabbed. You know what I mean? Like the only way to overcome these obstacles is with courage and love, and you got to be the top hero to take these suckers out. And I just think that they have earned their place amongst humans' top monsters.
So
for
can
sure.
you name some famous dragons out there?
Absolutely. First, I'd have to go with Smaug for sure. Probably just the overall especially when they remade the movie and in The Hobbit, Benedict Cumberbatch did such a good job,
Yeah.
and just a greedy like that where you can tell he's intelligent, but you can tell he's also got some flaws, and he's just a
Yeah.
beast. He's a monster. He embodies that ultimate power. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Right.
He embodies that in the monster himself, and then you can go to the opposite side of the spectrum, which my runner-up for me is Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Very small, quick, nimble, like very curious. He's not maniacal by any means, but he is incredibly powerful. He just literally makes this little shouting sound and there's a massive explosion. He's the Night Fury. At the start of the movie, everybody's terrified of him, but as soon as you get up to him and start to interact with him, he becomes a cute and cuddly companion. So I really like that aspect.
It's funny. One dragon that I think is forgotten about because you're always thinking about kind of breathing fire and destroying stuff and
Yeah.
Game of Thrones and Dragon Slayer and all that stuff. But there's an 80s movie called Neverending Story. And there's a
Yes.
dragon in there called Falcor.
Yes, I was going to bring him up too.
Oh, were you?
Yeah,
Okay.
Falcor. He's
Amazing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he almost looks. He's that Asian style of dragon, so the non-winged dragon.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about him was his fluffiness and
Looked
his,
like a dog.
A dog. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like elongated. It was like a dog mixed with the Chinese, serpentine dragon, so to speak.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. They take on incredible. They can become almost snake-like. Some are more lizard. Some have wings. Some don't. Some don't have arms. I just think that in terms of the sheer weight behind the myth and the legend can't be outdone. when
Yeah.
you're just
No,
talking about a
they're
dragon.
super cool. They've got it all. Like if you think about what's so scary, they're like a dinosaur.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a T-Rex, but it fucking flies. If that's not badass enough, it breathes breathes fire, like
or something,
or
like,
something.
yeah,
Something.
lightning,
But
acid.
I was just taking your
yeah,
smog
yeah.
as an example.
Yeah.
There's lots of different dragons. We could get into a whole.
He literally
whole show
takes
just on
over the
dragons.
greatest dwarven army, like overnight, just completely displaces the best place, in Middle Earth, just rolls in, nope,
Yeah.
this is mine now. The towns, the outlying towns are all destitute and they live in the shadow of the mountain. They're not talking about the shadow of the mountain, it's Smaug's shadow. It's incredible.
But also the dragon is a monster for the dwarves because it has the same weakness. It's the dwarven weakness of greed,
Yeah.
turned up to
Yeah.
a monstrous level. So if you're going by the different sins, monsters representing sins, then you can have
Yeah.
the dragon as being the sin of greed, and they're just taking that up to a
Yeah.
super high level.
So dragon's definitely up there. I would have to agree. I would say that's definitely I would put in my top 20.
Yeah.
They're definitely up there, and there's like a semi-important game that may have influenced a few people around, and it's called Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of people think of dragons just as fire breathing, right? So now people are all enlightened because they saw Game of Thrones. Spoiler. There's a dragon there that breathes something besides red fire. But in D&D, there's tons of dragons that breathe tons of different kinds of things. So,
Which I guess kind of will segue into our next monster. So go ahead. Why don't we talk about?
well, so if we're talking about D&D,
Yeah.
probably my favorite D&D monster is the Mind Flayer, also known as the Illithid. They're wonderful creatures.
What do they look like?
They look like basically they're like a purplish mauve humanoid, but it's got a octopus squid kind of head on it, and they are hyper intelligent. They're like, to them, human are just cattle to be used, enslaved, and eaten. They're so far above humanity, and in D&D there's lots of people know about, like, there's magic and knights and all that kind of stuff, but there is another kind of superpower in D&D called psionics, which mental powers. Now, Mind Flayers in the early versions of D&D, Mind Flayers are one of the few creatures that had these psionic powers, and one of the very most powerful of those creatures. So you would have people that are like super powerful wizards, great warriors and stuff, but they would just fall. The Mind Flayer could just take out an entire group of people because they have this totally different kind of.
So how did they
mental
typically?
power.
So for the people who don't know Dungeons and Dragons, how did Mind Flayers attack humans, and like what was their attacking? How did they kill people?
So they basically use a big mental burst of energy, and that'll stun people, make them go crazy, do all kinds of weird things to screw with their mind. But then they'll come up to you, they get behind you, and the reason they're called a Mind Flayer is because they flay your mind. Flaying, for people who don't know, flaying's an actual pretty terrible torture where you take the skin off of people. But they open people's heads up, and they have these tentacles here, and so they open up. Well, you can't see my hands, so that's the problem with this. But they basically get behind you, sort of like a super Joe Biden, and they get behind you, and instead of just smelling your hair, then they come up and they dig their tentacles through your skull and start eating your brain.
What level character would you have to be to encounter a Mind Flayer and come out on top? What would you say?
Well, since it's an 8+4 hit dice creature in first edition, then you want to be roughly 9th level before you have a party of 9th level people-ish. But D&D really isn't supposed to be all about super balanced encounters and stuff like that, except for you newfangled 3rd edition plus people, which is like the last 20 years, I guess. No, they're like super challenging because they break the mold. I'm specifically thinking back to the original ones because they had magic resistance, so your powerful wizards basically couldn't do anything against them because they had 90% magic resistance. Your warriors and stuff, they can mind control you, they can use your sonic blast, take you out, they can levitate, they have so many powers to just control things. They're great alien villains, and with those cool octopus heads, they're like little mini Cthulhu looking creatures.
And so, Alex, had you heard of a Mind Flayer before?
Yeah, so I was going to ask, like, what's the lore on the Mind Flayer that you know of? Like, where does it come from? Like, how do they explain it? Is it an alien race, or like, what is it?
They're
mythical
Extra
being?
dimensional.
Yeah, they're from a different.
Oh,
And then
okay.
it gets into the astral plane because they can do projection and
So that's
and
similar
stuff, so mental powers
to what I know, because from what I know is the Mind Flayer is from Stranger Things in season 2. Spoilers.
Same name,
the,
very different creatures.
Yeah,
Stranger
but that's
Things
what I
is
know, is that big kind of, and it's in a different plane and it's omniscient and it seems to have either some kind of influence or direct control over the Demigorgons.
And that's another thing that Demogorgon is also from D&D, but also the same name used, but in a very, very different way. But the mind control aspect is something that you do carry over. The mind reading, mind control.
Yeah, and it takes over
domination.
the young protagonist, Will. Like, he goes into the other realm, and then the Mind Flayer is kind of entrancing him and slowly getting his claws into him, and that's the whole.
Yeah, and part of what makes it such a good monster, the insidiousness of mind control, and the fact that they're so smart. Like, their level is actually above genius. So they're so smart. They really treat human as cattle. That they're just so far beneath them that they don't even consider them to be what to them are not human. They're subhuman, just like we would treat cattle. They're just there to do that.
So look up the Mind Flayer. Very cool art design too. So that's the next one. Actually, and kind of bleeding into the next. I'm going to kind of keep going on the D&D thing here. There is a demon or devil by the name of Tiamat, which is in Dungeons and Dragons. And if you're unaware of Tiamat is basically a 5-headed dragon, and each of the heads is able to spew different breath weapons.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, so acid, fire, frost, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's a female, and it comes from Babylonian myth, so it's thousands of years old. But in 1975, obviously, there was something called the Greyhawk Adventures, and that's when Tiamat first was introduced. However, they didn't call it Tiamat in the Greyhawk Adventures; they called it the Chromatic Dragon at the time.
Yeah, the Chromatic Dragon.
Chromatic Dragon. That's like magic reference comes up in Magic as well.
Totally.
Oh,
and
funny.
so this is where it comes from. And then it was only in 1977 when Monster Manual 1 came out that they actually gave the name of Tiamat.
Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
Tiamat, obviously, I would say is a huge, huge monster.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those prevailing constants in Dungeons and Dragons for over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
Of like when you think about it in the cartoon, everything. It's Tiamat, 5-headed dragon. It's like the party fights the dragon, but it's not just a dragon. It is a extremely smart dragon.
And the Tiamat goes back a lot further mythologically, historically, right? So the name of Tiamat is an ancient mythological monster as well. So
and also portrayed as female as well. Oh, it's a female demon. Yeah. So Tiamat actually in the Dungeons and Dragons lore rules the first layer of hell. So they're the 9 planes.
So it's
of
also like a devil, an archdevil.
Yeah.
like
Noble,
a demigod, but like Satan.
Well, lesser god technically, but
right.
But yeah, it's god level. She's so cool.
Yeah, so Tiamat, I would say, would be in there.
And if you're thinking about like modern movies, like the latest Godzilla movie, what's Godzilla's big villain in the latest movie? Multi-headed dragon thing. I mean, there's a little bit of Hydra-like overlap there. Hell, Hydra.
So you end up, see, Jason, you did it again. He keeps doing this. So he's bled into another monster.
Segue,
yeah. So we have to talk about it. Godzilla, which is on my list. Was it on your list or no?
No.
Was it on your list, Jason? Did you put Godzilla?
It was going to be one of the ones I was going to, but you already mentioned it before me. So
yeah, so Godzilla, 1954, when it was first introduced to the world.
Good rubber suit era.
Yeah, fantastic. Godzilla, known as the king of monsters.
Yeah.
Right? So we're talking, it's a commentary on what nuclear energy can do in creating our problems in the world. Godzilla obviously breathes radioactive energy.
And again, the monsters come from the culture that they're in, what's scary to them. For the Japanese in the 1950s, after the Americans double bombed them, the only people in the world who have ever used nuclear weapons against other people is the Americans. So the Japanese are the ones that suffered it. So nuclear things very scary to them.
Would you say that Godzilla, I mean, we call it a monster, but was Godzilla good or evil?
So we're not talking about heroes and villains, we're talking about monsters, but there is an interesting connection.
But what I would say is that from what I've witnessed, it evolved. Because when Godzilla was first conceived, 100% a monster, a thing to be conquered, kill it.
Right.
as the later movies evolved, it was, oh, maybe my enemy is my friend. We're accepting that they go back and say it's not a radioactive thing. It's a nature. It's a prehistoric creature that's lived forever and ever. We know. So they kind of de-vilify him, is what I would say in more modern. Like with the Godzilla that I grew up with, he was always the good guy.
Right.
But looking back and seeing things, no, he's not. He's just running around smashing stuff. He's not a good guy, like he's not. They later became that. It's like
because you got Godzilla, but then you have to have some monster on monster action to make it a little bit more interesting.
right. But I think when they first conceived him, he was supposed to be like the pinnacle of a bad monster that
but
came
again,
into an urban city,
But
Tokyo.
it's
Guns are
pro
useless,
wrestling,
like-
right? Like then he turns into the good guy that's
Yes.
there to save you from the even worse. The
Yeah.
the other heel monster comes in. And who better to fight him than an ex
You need a different kind of evil to defeat this evil.
that really understands him? And
So Godzilla has to be in the top 10 of the greatest monsters
sure.
of all
Yeah,
time. I mean, they've made so many movies, and
Yeah.
so many of them are utterly horrible, unfortunately. But I mean, you're going to a monster flick, right? Your expectations can't be like, oh, I can't wait for the story.
But also, like it's for how basic essentially it is. It's very well thought out. He lives in the ocean. He's math. Like there's some.
it's a basic thing, and it
Yeah.
delivers on what it is.
Yeah.
It's subgenre in itself is Godzilla movies. Like how many Godzilla movies are Godzilla versus this or Mechazilla or Mechakong, like all that stuff, all tied together. It's
The funny thing about Godzilla, if you look at it, is, trivia-wise, over the years, Godzilla's height and size has changed.
Right.
He has not been constant, right?
Yes.
And so they keep fluctuating, like the size of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a rumor that they want to have Godzilla in the Pacific Rim
course,
stuff,
that's-
right?
I
Of
was-
course,
I was
because
gonna
they're kind of in
kinda
this.
spawn that,
Yeah, because they're in
yeah.
the same universe. However, those things are massive, right? And Godzilla is not as big as those things,
or is he?
or is he?
Right. Because
So-
and some of the movies that I saw, they were I think when CGI was the next big thing, right? And
Yeah.
that's when they were really pushing that boundaries because he gets up out of the ocean, he's like almost like
Yeah.
an island, just like he's massive, immense, knocking over the skyscrapers. Like some of the
Yeah.
buildings in Japan were slightly taller than him. Like that's the scale.
So here's the thing I got to bring up about that. Godzilla typically lives in the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a ship on the ocean, and all of a sudden Godzilla starts to go and starts to rise out of the water.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that they're in the middle of the ocean. Okay. How deep is the ocean typically? Let's just say maybe a mile, maybe in some, let's just say
on average, yeah.
when he's rising out of the ocean, what's he standing on?
The bottom of the ocean.
No, because he's not a mile tall.
Oh, he's swimming then.
He's swimming, so he's dog paddling.
Yeah, he's the boss. Yeah, he's got webbed toes.
He's got what right. So that's something you never think about, right? Is he standing on like an underground mountain?
Well, there could be reefs or volcanoes or I mean.
But it's always the case.
Yes,
It's like Godzilla
it's
comes
true.
up and it's
Yeah, you
like,
never
what
think
the
about
fuck
that.
is he standing on to rise out of the water?
Very good point.
Because
Yeah.
but you don't think about it until you're like,
yeah, that's very funny. Yeah,
These radioactive powers.
yeah, he levitates.
he can levitate.
Yeah, but
He's
only
got-
in water. He levitates in water.
Yes, he's got these little like wings that he can use. Okay, so Godzilla definitely in there for top 10 monsters in my book. So Alex, up to you. What's the next monster you think that should be in our list?
I'm really gonna throw a wrench into it here and change it up. I think he's my number 2 favorite monster of all time. It's got to be Jack Skellington from the Nightmare Before Christmas. He's the Pumpkin King. He's the main man in Halloween Town, and he just he really. For me, growing up, I hate musicals, but it's probably my 3rd favorite movie of all time, and it is a musical.
Yeah.
And it to me it really just brought a lighter side to it and showed you that what are monsters, especially as a kid when you're growing up. The term monster seems so much more real, and the possibility that they're under your bed or out to get you or in the dark seems so much more real. So for me, he was a good way of kind of bridging that gap and saying, okay, well, maybe monsters have their own personalities. What does a monster do on his day off? Is he just a vindictive, murdering creature all the time? Well, maybe not, right? He could just be he hangs out with the other scary monsters and they go to the bar and they do whatever. And can he live a mundane life? Can he hate his job? So it was a really cool kind of look into a monster's life for me.
But you make a good point. What is a monster, right? So what's the definition of monster? Like, I would not put Jack. I wouldn't put him in there.
Right.
That's not a monster in my book.
Right.
Maybe a villain. Maybe an I don't know.
He's not a villain, right? Because he's the hero of the story.
Well, he's a hero, right?
Yeah.
So,
but he's a skeleton. He's a monster. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he has supernatural things. He's an undead dude.
I'm gonna read what the definition of monster is. So a monster is often a type of grotesque creature whose appearance frightens and whose powers of destruction threaten the human world and social moral order. A monster can also be human, but in folklore they are typically commonly portrayed as the lowest class, their mutations deformed, supernatural, or otherworldly. So some of those I would say would cross into there, but...
He lights himself on fire, and his job is to scare the children every Halloween.
Okay.
He's a scary guy. That's literally, he frightens children. That he's the boogeyman. Well, he's not the boogeyman, but the boogeyman's also in there. But he is, he's the...
But I don't know, does that make him a monster? You never met Mr. Dietrich, who lived four doors down from me as a kid. That dude was a monster, because he freaked me out.
There's two aspects to being a monster. You can either... It has an element of inhumanity to it. So you can either look inhuman, have inhuman, subhuman, superhuman types of powers or appearances, or it can also be like their mentality. Like, you can have something that looks monstrous but is actually good on the inside, and you have some other monsters that
we could segue into the next
one
that
look nice but are monstrous on the inside. So there's... And some are both.
Well, if I was going to vote on this one, I would say no.
Right.
So I don't consider Jack a monster.
He's all bullshit. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say bullshit, but I would not put him in that category as our monster, because when you think of monsters, it really is like that visceral feeling. Right?
I know I'm throwing a bit of a wrench into this one, but I got to stand by the fact that his job is to scare kids on Halloween. He represents that holiday. He's the Pumpkin King.
Got it.
He takes over Christmas and turns it into a horror show where there's toys eating kids and stuff.
Okay.
He's a bad dude.
Well, I'll give that to you.
He's a bad dude.
Okay. So you got the next one, Jay?
Okay, well, the next one, I usually do really old things, but I'm going to do something, well, I think it's new, but to me, people are going to go, what do you mean? No, I just watched that when I was a kid. Doctor Who has got lots of really good creatures in it, lots of good monsters in it, but I think probably my favorite monster of the 21st century is the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who.
And why?
Why? They are a classic monster, but they're a new classic. In my mind, an instant classic.
Okay.
Have you guys?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I know.
So they're great. They're basically, so on the outside, they're not particularly monstrous. They're basically statues of angels, and so you're kind of like, what? This is kind of lame. It's also Doctor Who, so you gotta have your budget things here, which is part of what makes it cool. But so they don't look like monsters at first. They're just angel statues that are there. No big deal. Nothing's there. I think the first episode they were in was called Blink or something like that.
Yep.
And the thing about them is, as long as you're looking at them, they're just statues of angels. And they often have their hands over their eyes, and they're called weeping angels, right? But when you're not looking at them, then they can move. And they're whatever the monster form is that no one knows when you're not looking at them. But as soon as you look at them, they can't move. They're frozen into this angel form. So they're really scary because try to not look at something, or every time you blink, they get a little bit closer. It's like a slow strobe light.
It's like flicking out the lights.
Flicking out the lights, and when the lights go, it's really creepy. Like they come and they're like just tick closer, tick closer.
Awesome.
They're like stalking you, and it's not even stop animation, but it's like slower than stop animation, that they just keep getting there a little bit more, and that also gets into like the classic Medusa, Gorgon-y kind of thing with the turning to stone. She had it where she was rubbing the stone out of her eyes and she was going to turn into one, and then the thing with the getting into the videos, and then if they get to you and if they're able to touch you, then you never existed.
Yeah, they
erase you from existence.
Which is the cool thing.
They had all those military guys that are coming at them, and then they keep disappearing, and she's like, and she keeps asking other military guys, like, oh, I'm going to go check into it. First guy goes check into it. Yeah. And the second guy's, I'm going to go check. Well, what about the other guy? What other guy? And so they're so powerful that way, and it's got a creepy kind of cool. It's maybe hard to describe, but they're like Medusas. They leave no trace. They can look totally innocent, and yet they have a suspense, tension kind of thing going with
And
them.
that's a cool thing about this particular monster, because it's not the grotesque type of thing. It's they do something which is it really gets to your core.
It plays
like
on your mind. Like
yeah,
it's almost
and how
like
frightening it would be.
Yeah, and to be wiped out from ever having existed is part of, like, monsters do things that are, like I say, inhuman, monstrous, things that are a type of supernatural. That's like beyond anything. You think about what are the scariest things, like, that you just don't exist ever. And then how do you stop them? Because they just keep coming. They're relentless. You can outrun them for a while.
Until you close your eyes.
And what are you going to do? Back up slowly with your eyes open all the time? You got to sleep sometime.
See, it's a funny thing because apparently, so I'm just looking this up now, that so the weeping angels, which are a race of predatory creatures in the long-running science fiction television show Doctor Who, they were nominated as one of the most popular and frightening Doctor Who monsters of all time.
There you go.
So Jason really hits the
And
nail on the
not
head
just
here.
frightening Doctor Who monsters, but I'm saying that these monsters are so good, they're beyond Doctor Who. Doctor Who's really good. But these are also, like I say, like, if you take the classic Medusas and stuff for turning people to stone, you take the things about moving, it's just, it's so good. It's like, it's a kind of thing that transcends Doctor Who, that this is the kind of thing that in 200 years from now, I could see these weeping angels being around in whatever mythology comes around in the future. They're a keeper.
Great monster, I would agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Doctor Who's got other good monsters too.
Well,
but
and what's cool, if I can interject too, is how they, some monsters, when there's a way, it's almost a lesson and a way to conquer it. And with these ones, ultimately what Doctor Who ends up getting is he ends up getting two of them to look at each other.
Yeah.
So then they're always looking at each other, and
so
they're stuck.
like I
looking
said,
at each
they're
other.
usually covering their eyes.
So he waits until they're just about to get him, and then he moves so that they're looking at each other, and then they break. It's like kind of like a
cycle.
paradox where
Yeah.
they break their own. Like they're looking at each other, so they are permanently statues
Right.
forever.
Yeah.
And that was like, it was really cool way to turn that around.
And you see, that's why this is kind of a segue, not a segue. This is I'm going totally off topic here. That's why I think Doctor Who is one of the absolute greatest heroes of all time. It is in my top 3 most favorite television shows, science fiction thing ever. Like, I am a Doctor Who fanatic.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is Weeping Angel, yes, but I also, you have to throw in, if you're going to talk about that, the Daleks.
Yes.
Daleks, their sole purpose is to exterminate. That's it.
Exterminate.
So the Daleks, by the way, a little trivia here. Daleks, their original race was called the Khalids, and it's Dalek. That's backwards. That's where it comes from.
Do you know why they switched it? They just didn't like it, so they swapped it around.
No. So the original race was like this race when they had an atomic war on their planet.
Oh, and that's why they're all.
So they were the Khalids, right? And then what had happened was they had this nuclear holocaust that happened, and they turned into these really grotesque little creatures, these little alien things.
Yeah.
So in the encasement of all Daleks are these little
guys
creatures
driving them. Yeah.
Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And
That's what's behind the curtain.
yeah, amazing. So you could go, you could do a whole episode of Daleks in here,
Yeah.
but they're hilarious too, right? So one of the best quotes in Doctor Who is they addressed this many years ago, but they basically said, "Well, they're not that scary. I mean, all you have to do is go up a flight of stairs and they're screwed," right? So that's what the Doctor had said at one point. But then they could levitate and stuff like that. So Daleks definitely one of the cheesiest but coolest
And
monsters.
super old school. Like, Doctor Who goes back a long time. Like, a lot of people are only familiar with the modern Doctor Who's, and they say, series 1, series blah blah blah. But those series, they restarted them. Doctor Who goes way back into black and white era.
Yeah, and that was the very first episode of Doctor Who was the Daleks were that was the enemy.
Yeah.
And I remember going to England to Wales. I went to the Doctor Who factory.
Oh, really?
And they had the toys, and there's a museum there, and it was so amazing. And cool. I have old pictures of it. And so Daleks definitely up there as a single-minded monster that just all it wants to do is just destroy any life other than Daleks.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's got to be and if you go to England, and everyone knows, you could probably take a Dalek and put it up, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I know what that is."
People would totally recognize it. Yeah.
So it just the culture of it, huge. So definitely, I think that's up there. Alex, what do you got next?
I'm going to talk about the Kraken next. I think that I when I was growing up, Pirates of the Caribbean was a big thing, and when they came out with the Kraken, that just really, my father's in the military. I spent a lot of time at sea on out there on the open ocean, and I never watched Jaws growing up, so I didn't quite have that experience. But for me, the Kraken shook me a little bit, because it was like, there really are giant squids. You don't know what lurks at the bottom of the ocean. That whole myth. Which is kind of how a lot of these monsters originate, is the unknown, an explanation into the unknown, and the fear of not knowing itself. And I think what the Kraken represents is the unknown in the ocean, which is, however much percent, 80% of our planet. Yeah. And we know less about the ocean than we know about, anything basically. And it's just a deep, dark beast that surfaces and can wipe out entire ships with a swipe of its tentacle, and it's portrayed as more of a fish, more of a squid, sometimes an octopus. It's just this mythological Leviathan-like creature that is the devastation of any sailor.
And it's the Kraken. Do you know where it comes from?
I think it's a Norse myth originally, and it's called the Jurgemorgen. It's got a really long, it's would you know? What's it called?
Well, so it's a giant-sized Scandinavian squid, basically, and that's where it comes from. So, according to the Norse sagas, the Kraken dwells in the coasts of Norway and Greenland and terrorizes nearby sailors. Yeah. So, that's kind of where it comes from. So, initially, this comes from the sightings of giant squids that sailors had, which were about 13 or 15 meters, or 40 to 50 feet. And so this is kind of where the Kraken comes from.
And also, like, back at that time, when you went out to sea, you weren't necessarily coming back. It was a very scary terrain to cross at some point, when your boats are made out of wood and you're not...
Yeah, and people don't come back. Why didn't they come back? Was it sea, or was it the Kraken?
I saw this monster. I saw this massive tentacle. You don't know about what predators lurk in the deep, kind of thing. So very cool monster,
And so the Kraken actually shows up in a lot of fiction.
Yeah, shows up in D&D too. They're also very intelligent mastermind villains in D&D.
Cool.
Oh, really?
Giant master.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah,
super intelligent underwater masterminds.
Yeah. Also in the 1981 movie Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
The Kraken was in there.
Well, a little different looking one.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you have a Kraken? Release the Kraken.
Release the Kraken. And that's what I like too, is that a lot of times too, it's like a subjugated beast. So, for example, Clash of the Titans, and in Pirates of the Caribbean as well, like Davy Jones or Hades is controlling the Kraken and unleashing it. It's the plague, and this again comes from a time when the sea and the ocean is a source of life and like travel, communication, connective, but it's also a deep dark abyss that can swallow you up, and you'll never
very
come
unpredictable
back.
And scary.
Right? It's something that you need in life, but it's also an incredible danger. Yeah. And the Kraken was the barrier between surviving and not surviving.
Yeah.
So the Kraken obviously can be argued to be in the top 100 of the best monsters of all time. I didn't put it in my top 10, but you did too. Yeah. Do you have a fear of the sea?
No, I don't. I spent a lot of time out there in different vessels. I think it helps when you start out in like war vessels, giant boats, and I've been on aircraft carrier. It's like whatever, the ocean, no big deal.
So you've been to sea then?
Yeah.
Have you ever been blown ashore?
So it's obviously quite a bit different, but I have a healthy respect for the ocean, and I understand where the myth comes from for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so the Kraken and their sea beast, obviously. So Jason, the ball is in your court. What is our next monster that we're going to cover that we think should be in our top 10 of all time?
Our next monster, in our last episode, we had a great movie that we looked at by an awesome director. What was that, boys?
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Live.
Yeah, John Carpenter.
They Live, and John Carpenter was the director. He's made many, many good movies. And in fact, little trivia thing here, just watching the new Stranger Things.
Yep.
And there was a poster on the wall.
Yeah. Did they have one for The Thing?
The Thing.
Yeah.
Movie called The Thing. One of the best monsters ever. I know they did a
remake, did they?
sequel prequel thingy.
Yeah.
Recently, I think it's recently, so it's probably 2010, 11, 12, something in there. But the original The Thing, oh my God, like the original Alien and the original Thing are two of the earliest movies that I remember being really, really
Scared,
scary
yeah.
movies that hold up over time, and you're like, this would still be scary to someone now. Like, not just cheesy scary, but legitimately, I think if you played them for anybody, they're timeless, scary, timeless monsters. So well done. And to me, special effects aren't everything, as you know from my original Star Trek fandom. It's not all about special effects, but the special effects for the time, just amazing.
Yes.
Like, people these days are so spoiled on special effects, but that monster, I just remember at the time being blown away by like how good they were, and they were good in a way that added to the scariness of the monster. The Thing is an amazing movie, and it's an amazing monster. It's
So, Alex, have you seen The Thing yet?
No, I only think of the Fantastic Four thing. That's the only thing. that
Okay.
comes to my
totally
mind.
different.
Yeah, I have no idea. What does it look like?
You've got to watch. That's the thing.
We need to watch it. We'll do an episode because
Maybe
it
we shouldn't
is
get too much into it.
it is worthy of its own thing. So,
Okay.
The Thing is a 1982 movie that came out by John Carpenter. It is absolutely terrifying. They're basically trapped in the Antarctic, and it's based on a 1938 film.
I think I've seen seen previews for the remake that came out in the 90s or something.
Yeah,
like
Yeah,
that.
so sorry, not a film. It's a 1938 novel, which was by a guy named John Campbell Jr., and he wrote a novella called "Who Goes There?" Basically, it tells the story of a group of American researchers in the Antarctic who encounter a thing, which is basically a parasitic extraterrestrial life form that assimilates and then imitates the organisms that it basically.
Yeah.
So you don't know. Like I could be like the thing. And so the group is basically overcome by paranoia and conflict because they don't know who's the thing.
And they're trapped because they're in the middle of the Antarctic. Where can you go? You're at a remote station.
Yeah, and it's so because you can't go anywhere. And it stars Kurt Russell, one of my favorites. So
Right.
you got to see it. It is hands down one of the scariest
Really?
films. It is
very cool.
wicked.
Yeah.
Good time. Super fun.
Excellent.
I would put money down that one stands up.
Okay,
Even for
yeah.
someone who hasn't seen it there. Let's say a bottle of Kraken versus a bottle of Grey Goose.
As Jason looks at the table
that's the
here,
bet.
what we got right next to Mjolnir there.
Yeah.
So yeah, The Thing. Agreed. I would say that the Thing is in the top 10 for sure.
And one of the things that makes monsters scary is, again, I talked about inhumanity and whether things look monstrous or if they look like humans, but they're monstrous inside. The Thing is one of the best monsters because it has both. Because when you see it in its transforming mode, when it's not looking like somebody else, it is one ugly MF.
Yeah.
It's a scary looking monster like that, but then once it takes the form of someone, it looks exactly like people, acts exactly like them. You can't tell it apart.
Wow.
So it's got that inner inhumanity and the outer inhumanity, depending on which point there, and it's a threat to all humanity. Great monster, great movie.
Thumbs up. So in a Dane's Dungeon, I would say ultimate cool shit. That is.
Yeah, I give it
super
3
high.
thumbs up. I'm growing an extra arm for that one.
So Alex,
cool.
Alex,
Okay,
you'll have to
let's
see
check
that
it out,
one. So kind of going on to that genre of kind of craziness and super scary. This is not really a movie, but this is literature, and it goes back to H.P. Lovecraft, and we're going to be talking about Cthulhu. And if you don't know the Cthulhu mythos, in 1928, H.P. Lovecraft came out with basically a short story about Cthulhu. And Cthulhu is part of these genre he made of these old gods. And the old gods were extremely powerful. And they weren't like the Greek gods or Norse gods. They didn't have the motivations of lust and power.
And nor are they demons or devils or evil things like that. They're beyond good and evil.
They're almost like forces of nature.
Right.
And the
Like physics, like laws or something. You know,
All-
like,
They're
almost
even
like
beyond. They're
statements.
even beyond the laws of
like
physics and nature.
beyond our
too.
dimension almost.
oh, okay.
The one consistent and constant thing in the H.P. Lovecraft mythos and Cthulhu is basically all these gods are massive. They're huge.
Great old
They go beyond time. So before humanity, they were around, and if humans ever see them, they instantaneously go crazy. They go insane
Okay.
because your mind can't comprehend what they look like.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the mythos, H.P. Lovecraft is absolutely twisted, and an amazing writer, but
Amazing.
but crazy. Like most people are like, oh well, Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Like this goes
Right.
far beyond that.
Yeah.
And it's very. You always use the word meta.
Yeah.
There's so
Yeah.
much meta stuff in this.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great.
And
So
every horror writer, director thing that you like was influenced by him, or or the person they were influenced by was influenced by him. It's hard to overestimate how much influence he's had.
What you just talked about was like, sounds like Bird Box to me, that new one that came out when people are, there's an invisible force that's roaming around and people go insane and they kill themselves, or
Right.
they become insane and make people look at the thing that makes them insane and either kill themselves or become an insane person.
kind of, and I bet
That,
that's
it sounded
yeah.
exactly like that.
yeah. So the Cthulhu mythos is
There's so much. We were just talking about the Thing in the Antarctic, so if you've just watched the Thing after pausing this and taking my advice to watch it, you should probably read The Mountains of Madness, H.P. Lovecraft in the Antarctic. Great thing. Also play Call of Cthulhu, one of the best role-playing games ever made.
awesome. And if you don't know what Cthulhu looks like, Cthulhu basically, it's been described in appearance as resembling kind of like an octopus.
Like a kraken.
Kind of. It had
Oh, really big mind flare.
It kind of had like a dragon and human caricature. It was hundreds of meters tall.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely huge. It had webbed human-looking arms and legs, a pair of rudimentary wings on its back. Its head was kind of depicted similar to like a giant octopus, which I said, unknown number of tentacles coming surrounding its mouth. It was, like I said, if people had the possibility of ever looking at it, they would just lose their minds and with any contact with this type of being. So
Yeah.
super cool. I would say in our monster genre here,
Yeah.
this is way outside the normal realm of like
It's a
scary
monster to other
Right.
monsters.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The,
Nice.
the
Yeah.
Cthulhu mythos and all the connected things. There's a series of writers that they get in there, H.P. Lovecraft being the central one in this, but it's
Yeah.
had such a big influence.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So Cthulhu, check it out. Read some of the short stories because it's well worth it. And I don't know if there's been probably some movies and
There's
stuff.
been
but-
some movies
but they
like
never do it justice.
From Beyond and stuff like that, but they haven't got one that's quite been able to do a real version. I mean, it's hard because his type of horror isn't the type of horror people are used to. Even though he's been really influential, it's sort of his horror transcends the way a lot of people do the horror. But Cthulhu definitely one of the biggest monsters ever.
ever.
Now I know I went right before you, Ari, but I'm gonna have to butt in here, Alex.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Because one of my other monsters is the deep ones of Innsmouth, another H.P. Lovecraft story, The Shadows over Innsmouth.
Okay.
And they're related to Cthulhu in a way. They are just one of the best short stories ever.
So how do they differ from Cthulhu? Why are they on the list?
Why are they on the list? Because the whole thing, to me, again, the inhumanity of monsters.
Okay.
And the story, a guy basically goes to, he's all New England, East Coast, New America stuff. And a guy goes to this small sea town, looking into things. He's staying in a hotel, and he's there in this town. The people look a little bit weird. There's something just a little bit off with them. They've got little fishy, froggy features that are just a little bit off. They don't look quite human. And then some of them, they're human, but just a little bit off. And then as he gets deeper into it, he realizes that there's something really wrong with the town. I don't want to give the whole do the whole story, but in addition to Cthulhu, which he lies sleeping on the bottom of the oceans. Right. There's other great old ones in the Cthulhu mythos, and there's Father Dagon and Mother Hydra.
Yeah.
And they're sort of in some ways Cthulhu related, but they're the sort of mother and father of the deep ones. So what the deep ones are, they're sort of like a hybrid kind of humans hybridizing with the Cthulhu-ish race thing. I'm not saying this
Because don't they breed with the humans?
And they breed with the humans,
yeah.
and then they're inbred, and they start developing these features and stuff. So these inhuman features, and what makes this story really scary, a little bit of a spoiler here, is the guy, as he goes on and realizes that this town is part of his heritage. So what makes the deep ones so scary is that being hybrids of humans is that again, you start out young looking like you're totally human. And then as you get older, you get more and more of these features of the deep ones. And then eventually as you get older, you end up having to go into the sea and join the deep ones. Father Dagon, Mother Hydra are the oldest. They're older and bigger. They grow with the age. So it all started in this one town, Innsmouth, where this captain brought back some stuff from the South Seas, and so they have a little cult in the town, and it slowly spreads as people get bred into the thing, and they worship, and they're gonna bring Cthulhu back. So super cool monster. And relating this to D&D, Sahuagin Kuatoa, definitely some relations there, but I could do a whole show anyway. Don't want to get too far astray.
So you'll notice that in the Torvus podcast, we'll have some references which are, everyone will know, and then we start to get into some references that only the ultimate geeks will know. So if you get some of the references that we're making in this podcast, then amazing and good on you, and you have found your home.
Yeah, well done, yeah.
So we try not to go too crazy because we don't want to exclude the listening audience from oh my God, what are they talking
They
about?
can show you new stuff, though.
Yeah, but if you don't get it, maybe you should check out something new. It's good to go, oh yeah, I love that too. That's really cool. But sometimes it's like, hey, I haven't seen that before. I haven't read that story before. That's cool. I should check that out. And people that usually have the same interests are going to like the same things. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the points that we're trying to do here. We're trying to illustrate that geek culture is really pretty deep, and it covers so many different genres. And there's stuff that I learn all the time from Jason and from Alex that I just don't know. So it's ever expanding. So
yeah, we can expand your mind horizontally or
vertically.
If you get that.
Yeah, that was a good reference too. Let's see if anyone actually gets that reference and they type in the comments like, "Hey, I know where that's from." Alex, your turn.
I'm going to go back to a classic. I'm going to hit up Shelob and the Eight-Legged Freaks and Aragog from the Harry Potter series. Basically, they're just giant spiders.
Okay.
Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because personally, I am immune to spiders. I hold tarantulas. I don't care about wolf spiders, whatever it is, you name it. They don't bother me. I'm not really afraid of spiders. But my girlfriend is petrified of them. And then I watch the movies and I see where the giant spiders are, and nothing has really changed about them. Mm-hmm. They're just massive. Big. And now all of a sudden, they are some of the most terrifying motherfuckers on the planet. And all they've done is quadrupled in size. So I gotta put them up there in terms of one of those monsters where if you were looking at how a spider gets its prey and how it feeds on its prey, it's a terrifying animal.
Yeah.
And now when you take that to an extreme and monstrify it, it becomes definitely one of the top predatory creatures that mid-level adventurers have to get through on their quests.
And it's funny because the thing about spiders, I think when you look, I think they have the top 5 things that people are
scared of.
And snakes are in there, and spiders are those are the top 2.
You could literally take out 1/8 of the planet just by having a giant spider. People will just literally just run and trample each other to death if there's a spider present. You know?
There's a great internet meme which I absolutely love, and it basically has a spider on the wall and has someone holding a handgun and they're pointing it right at a spider, and then the caption is that seems fair or something like that. I could totally see that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where people they didn't have to change it too much to really make it terrifying to pretty much anybody at any level. Even for me, I have no issue with a giant spider. That's a terrifying way to die, having be restrained and then liquefied while you're alive, and they drink you from the inside out.
There's some great early 50s and 60s and 70s movies which have spiders and stuff like that are awesome. Did you ever see Arachnophobia?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay, so that came out in the 90s, and basically,
old,
but it was pretty old, quote unquote. it basically jumps on the fears of people's spider thing, and it's the spiders that kind of infest this town, and people freak. It was awesome.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Well, and that's the thing too. In a lot of the spider movies, sometimes they'll be the big spider, but then there'll just be smaller spiders around, and they'll pop out of people. And the spiders are just they can get on so many different levels, right?
Here's something you missed out on because you're too young.
What?
Hubba Bubba.
Oh, the spider gum?
The gum that had spider eggs in it.
What?
Don't you remember that from the 80s?
It's a reference. That's again.
It wasn't. I don't think it was. I don't think it was real. But don't you remember people saying, "Oh, don't eat that gum. It's got spider eggs in it. They're gonna grow in you."
Oh, really? No, I never heard that. That's
yeah.
one of those
Maybe it was
things
just one of our local things.
yeah, it's like, oh, you got razor blades and the apples and stuff. Okay, I got it. Okay. Okay, so spiders, yeah, definitely. So now we're going to kind of move into a different thing. So talking about what freak people out, one of my top monsters is, we're going to talk about zombies, but in particular, there's a particular zombie from a particular movie that was hands down just so kick-ass. In 1985, there was a movie called Return of the Living Dead, which is my favorite zombie movie, which you haven't seen,
No,
Alex.
I haven't seen
We're
it.
gonna have to watch that.
Yeah,
very
so
soon.
we're going to watch it because it's incredible. But in the movie, there's a zombie that they refer to as Tarman. And Tarman basically is a zombie which is kept in this big drum. And it gets exposed to the air, and then it kind of starts to melt. And throughout the film, eventually the heroes, quote unquote, encounter it, ends up killing one of them, eats their brains and stuff.
If you see a military drum, don't open it.
Don't
Right.
open it. But the makeup of it is incredible. It's actually considered in movie history one of the best makeup and zombies of all time.
Really? Wow, that's fantastic.
So the actor they got for it was extremely skinny, and so he's in this. He's got clothes hanging off him, and it was so good. So Tarman,
Yeah.
because it is absolutely frightening, and the makeup so good. So I will put that in my top 10 of best monsters. So
Yeah.
you haven't seen it. Jason knows
Seen it-
exactly what we're talking about.
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it in a long time.
But you remember that
Oh
scene.
yeah. It's
So-
one of the best zombie movies.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of zombie.
Was
movies.
it like just like a random zombie that happened to be in a barrel that now is like a cult following, or was it like a character
Okay.
that was introduced?
No, so what happens is it's kind of it does have a cult following. So Alex, you're talking about kind of where Tarman comes from. It basically, the U.S. military took all these contaminated people. They were running experiments, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was called the 2,4,5 trioxide chemical.
Oh, okay.
And they put it on humans,
Yeah.
and it turned them into zombies and things like that. So
okay.
they basically took one of these humans, put it in a container, and then they sealed it. And then what happens is these humans ended up breaking, and the seal broke because it's been there for years and years.
bureaucracy?
Yeah, so that's where it comes from. So Tarman definitely in there.
Oh, that's
There's
funny.
so like zombies are like a super monster. Like they span so many different things, and I think zombies are a great monster because they have a purity to them. They're it sounds kind of weird, but when you're dealing with zombies, I think the reason zombie movies are always popular and you can always make everything better by adding zombies to it is because you know what you're dealing with zombies. Our lives have all these complicated things. We have to go, is this right? Is this wrong? Should I do this? Should I not do this? When you're dealing with zombies, you always know where you stand. What do they want?
Your brains.
Your brains,
You gotta
right?
shoot 'em in the head,
Are
take
they
their
good
eye
or are
off.
they bad? Are they on your side against you? You know where you stand. There's no moral ambiguity with zombies. It's just, it's there. And you think about
You're right.
everything, you can add zombies to it. Like, I'm not into the things, but if you're into chick lit stuff, right? Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
And the funny thing is, there's some dumbasses out there that actually think that the zombie apocalypse is going to come. And I always joke about the zombie apocalypse like I'm preparing for it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a prepper, 100%. Do I believe this zombie apocalypse is coming? No.
No, but it gives you a template, something to...
Yes. So it is a template on basically, well, what happens if there's social disorder? What happens if
Yeah.
there's a massive earthquake and everything
Yeah.
breaks down?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's basically
Right.
humans who are marauding
Or
are zombies.
or a virus that just wipes out.
But whatever it is,
a bunch
zombies
of the
can
population, right?
stand in for anything.
Correct.
In a way, zombies are like super Nazis because if you're in movies and you need to make a villain that someone's going to fight and they're going to be irredeemably the bad guy, and well, to most people would say, okay, let's kill the Nazis, no problem. People aren't going to argue about it.
Right.
But if there's a little too much moral ambiguity,
Yeah.
if the Nazis are good or not, then you got to crank it up one more notch. The 11 gives you zombies.
Yeah,
Totally
but also to Ari's point there, it's a good like how the zombies aren't even and for example, The Walking Dead, the zombies aren't the problem. They got the zombies down. It's
Right.
the other people
Yeah.
in the world
100%.
that's all
Yeah.
falling apart,
Yep.
right? And that's a really cool thing about it is whenever you see any kind of zombie movie,
Yeah.
you're always initially like, how did this first zombie get all these people and how, like
And
True,
I'm
but-
gonna jump forward and probably ruin this because I should keep this to the end. But the ultimate monster are humans.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Really.
Yeah.
But let's put that.
But
yeah.
in a way, what you're saying is, but the humans turning on each other. But in a way, zombies are the monster. But in a way, zombies are just the force of nature. The
catalyst,
excuse
yeah.
that makes it's like if humans caught in a storm, they're starving. It's a plague, whatever. The zombies are the catalyst that make the humans fight each other as a monster. So they're a monster in their own right, but they also bring out the monstrosity within us too. So that's that. On the outside, they look like monsters. On the inside, they're monsters, but they bring out the inside monsters within us, and then they turn us into outer monsters if they get us. And yeah.
And one of the things
Brilliant.
about we always talk about monster flicks, it's like things always happen at night. Like things that happen day are really scary too, but things night whereas that's the monster thing, like the full moon type of thing.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna roll right into that. So monster within, nighttime, full moon.
Yeah.
We gotta bring up werewolves.
Okay.
100%.
True.
So
But we can go back just a little bit there earlier, because one of the first monsters we started this thing with, what did we start with?
aliens.
Aliens.
Yeah.
When did they come out?
Oh, see, he's making a reference.
They come out at night.
Mostly.
Mostly.
Okay,
I
that's
got
a
you.
reference from Aliens.
Go on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Every time someone mentions about coming out at night, that's what goes through my mind.
Yeah, that's from a character named Newt in Aliens.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead. Talk about your werewolves.
Yeah, so for me, what I think I really appreciate is like that primal instinct inside of all of us. And when you're bitten by a werewolf, when the full moon comes out, you have no control, and it just becomes this primal instinct aspect of. I think what they're contrasting is how a ferocious beast back in the day, which would have been a pack of wolves, that what a person is capable of with that same ferocity,
Right.
and not recognizing friend from foe, just shredding somebody limb from limb. And then that's not really my favorite werewolf, the one that has no control and the moon controls it, and it's more of a curse. The classic werewolf.
Yeah.
I think it's very cool, but I would not want to
But
be
what
one of those
makes
werewolves.
werewolves so cool is you can have a sliding scale
Yes.
of that control.
Yeah.
So
and
when you think of werewolves, Alex, what are you thinking of, like movie-wise?
definitely Underworld and like lichens, like lycanthropes, was the short term for that. And that's that's where sort of you're looking hundreds of years down the line where werewolves have bred and they've slowly become closer to that 50-50 human wolf, and they're able to control when they transform. Certain werewolves are even able to kind of push silver out of their body. They're much more human than they are beast, but they become that monster and then live as that monster, because you always see this struggle between werewolves and vampires and zombies and where they all lie. And even for zombies, the more human you can make it, I think the cooler that monster becomes. So instead of just being a mindless beast, to me the top werewolf has got to be the one that has some control.
Yeah, the closer they get to being like human, the scarier they are. Because in a way, the more you can relate to them, the more scary
exactly.
a monster can be. In some ways, it can be more frightening when you're less human, but you can be more scary when you're more human.
And so the funny thing is about the werewolf thing, like lycanthropy and all that. So the underworld stuff, that actually goes back to they pulled very heavily from White Wolf, the publisher.
Oh, okay.
And so there was Werewolf the Apocalypse. So they made a game which is called Werewolf the Apocalypse, which came just after Vampire the Masquerade.
Okay.
Have you heard of these before? The role-playing games?
I've heard of Vampire the Masquerade,
Okay.
but not werewolf.
So yes, they had
Werewolf was the second.
Yeah, they had the second, and then they had
Werewolf was
Mage the Ascension, and then they had
Mummy.
Hunters and Mummy. Like they had all these different things. So that's where they came, where the werewolves would have power. You would be able to control, and it kind of changed the whole werewolf culture. I really like White Wolf stuff. I was a huge Vampire the Masquerade person. Werewolf is okay, but I was always drawn to the vampire thing,
Right.
which is awesome. But when you look at the original like films of the vampires, like from the 1930s and 40s, it's
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The Wolfman.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what it is.
Yeah.
American Werewolf in London.
They're they're more
Great
they're
film.
more animal, less human. And then as you start to humanize them, like that's what's so great about Dracula, right? Is he's this count. He's got this sort of elegant human side to him
Yeah.
as well as the beast within. So that's what that's where my true werewolf lies, is more of a lichen.
It's super classic, right?
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And going on that, you just mentioned Dracula. Dracula was in my top 10 of top monsters of all time. 1931, Dracula film came out with Bela Lugosi, and that was huge, right? And it was freaky. People absolutely lost their minds when Dracula came out. And there's been a million remakes, obviously. That
Yeah,
Well,
and lots of different.
He's the front man for the whole vampire thing really taking effect, right? I truly believe this, that he kind of started the whole vampire sexy thing.
Yeah.
Because now that's
But
a
there's
huge
True, but there's
thing.
other kinds of vampires like Nosferatu.
Yes.
Right, and so Nosferatu came out in 1922, which Max Schreck, he played Count Graf Orlok. Again, I was really, really big into vampires.
Hilarious
Yeah.
parody of it years later. I can't
Yes,
remember.
but I studied like the whole like vampireology and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That's my wheelhouse.
Oh, awesome.
And I'd love to do an episode on that, which we will
Yeah.
do. But back in 1897, Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, and that kind of kickstarted based on the history of Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler.
Yep.
And then he just
Yeah.
changed it, and it turned into this sexy thing. And the taking of blood is just a metaphor for
Yeah.
sex.
And
That's
it's very
all.
Yes.
Victorian.
Yeah,
It
it's
had
huge.
to be very timely.
Well,
for
and that's kind of there's such a contrast in what you see your vampires, and even as they reference it, like again, go to Underworld, they had their covens, and there was the class that was the elegant, and they all were dressing up and drinking blood from the goblets instead of from the vein, and whatnot. So I think that's a very cool aspect to a monster where it talks almost about the corruption and the bureaucracy behind it. Just because you dress up fancy and you play like you're a human, you can still be a monster that destroys lives. You know
And
I
what
mean?
they did with the whole underworld thing, and it goes back to the Vampire the Masquerade. It's basically the politics, like these monsters, and
Yeah.
they live,
And
like they're running the show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yes, they drink blood and stuff, but the whole monstrous stuff. It's not them that drinking blood. It's that they're ruling people. They're
Yeah.
controlling.
Blade did the same thing.
and they had
yeah.
the different,
Blade, yes.
Yeah.
different tribes and acting in different ways, and there's so many good vampire things. Again, Buffy was amazing. Had some good werewolf things in
Yeah,
it too.
yeah.
There's the great mockumentary lately.
Which one?
What do they do in the shadows?
Oh, what they do in the shadows?
They did the
So
movie,
good.
and now the first season of it is out. 10 episodes anyway. I don't know if that's a whole
Wow.
season or
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or
Yeah,
just
I have
part.
to
Yeah,
watch
they-
that.
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, it's great vampire mockumentary. Like
There's also been some terrible, like vampires have totally jumped the shark in some ways too. Like we gotta, if we're gonna be fair,
Yeah, it's-
like Twilight.
Oh
is,
my God, no,
same
we're
with
that's not
werewolves.
vampires. That
Oh,
doesn't
God.
count.
It's and that's the thing is that at
Fake vampires.
Oh, it's total bullshit. Total bullshit.
Yeah.
But that happens with anything. But it's such a popular concept, and it has so many different variations, like the zombie. But yeah, just the classic vampire is definitely a top notch monster. for
So
sure.
there you go. And I'm not even talking about vampires. I'm actually just talking about Dracula. But
Dracula,
I would
yeah.
agree with vampires.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
a
yeah.
great monster. So Jason, what do you got? What do you think should go on our next list here?
Well, let's switch it up a little bit here.
Okay.
And I mean, monsters often get associated with fantasy, medieval things, and then they bleed into the modern stuff. But monsters also fit into science fiction very well. I'll just briefly mention that we were talking about zombies. In Firefly Serenity, the Reavers, in some ways, could be looked at as a sort of zombie-esque kind of creature, and they're a very good monster. But here I'm specifically thinking of even lighter science fiction stuff does have monsters that are suitably horrific. The Borg in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yes.
When those first came out, it was like, wow! It was like really. They were the first scary Star Trek monster, and with the cliffhangers and stuff, you were really worried. And again, it's the dehumanizing, making people inhuman. They're kind of human, but not that combination of man and machine. And when Jean-Luc Picard gets taken,
Locutus.
becomes Locutus the Borg.
Yes.
Right? People still make fun of me when I got my Bluetooth thing on. If only I was bald, then I could really rock that shit. But yeah, the Borg were very scary because, you will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. They are a relentless monster that you feel that, like, oh my God, you've got all this high technology and it does you no good. Like I was saying about mind flayers, about what part makes them scary. Your D&D character, yeah, you got your big powerful magic spells. You're archmage, woo, big scary deal. It's got magic resistance. You're useless. Ooh, you're a big tough fighter. Whatever. It's just going to control your mind and blast you. You're like, ooh, we're Starfleet. We've got transporters. We've got phasers. We've got shields.
just immune
and
to
it's
all
like,
your
it's like,
tricks.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't care about your technology. We just absorb it in some way. It's like, wow. It was like, oh my God, and they're wiping things out left, right, and center.
And I think about the Borg came out, again, Jason and I are massive Star Trek fans, and 1989 is when the Borg were first introduced. But he touches on a point where the power scale, it was like the Federation, very strong.
Yeah.
As you said, all this technology. But when the Borg were introduced, it was like
off.
you were the Starfleet was like kindergarten.
Yeah.
And these guys were like fourth year college
Yeah,
people.
and they did it in a scary way because it's like, okay, Starfleet's fighting the Klingons, the Romulans. Okay, yeah, it's like,
all the
okay,
same
we're like,
kind of,
okay, fighting the other guys. You know, we're against them. You know, they're a little bit better than us. We're a little bit better than them. Whatever. It's a tough fight. It's scary. But these were actual monsters. So I say, if picking a monster from Star Trek, not just bumpy-headed alien of the week kind of thing, that many of them very cool in other ways. But this episode's about monsters, and I think the Borg were the best Star Trek monster.
And one of the things that all of these things bring out in humans, which I think we can talk about, it doesn't matter what we've talked about, is even if the monster is so many levels above us, in culture, it makes the humans raise to the level to defeat them. You know, so you may not have the technology or the intelligence or the cunning, but eventually we come out on top. I mean, that's fiction. I honestly believe that, you know, if the aliens do come knocking on our door, like the real aliens, that there's no fight. There's no fight to be had.
No,
There's
not at this stage.
There's no Stephen Hawking that's going to come save us. It's like we're so outmatched that it won't even be funny. But there's this arrogance that humans have that we can defeat any kind of creature that comes our way.
Well, so far.
Yeah.
But
that's the fiction
We
thing,
conquered
right?
one planet. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but I don't know if we've conquered it. I think
we're
we've maybe
destroying
destroying
it.
it.
Well,
but
it's-
Maybe we're our own monster, but
Yeah.
that could be another.
Well, but I think you brought an interesting point too about how to rise above the occasion, and another point to it too is also to move forward through death. You know, a light at the end of the tunnel. These stories, these myths that, you know, dragons, the Kraken, you know, the Borg, whatever it is, this obstacle, this insurmountable thing.
Yeah.
The way to triumph over all of these things, you just have to be that 111th guy who just has enough hope and courage and, you know, all those things that don't physically add up to anything, but there's that mental aspect to drive through and to succeed. And I think that's what, you know, why these myths and stories truly exist. A bit of a lesson, cautionary tales, don't wander into the woods at night as a child.
Yeah.
And also, when shit gets tough, you gotta, you know, get down and, you know, and figure it out. Otherwise, you're gonna be the victim.
But the funny thing is, we always talk about monsters as these tangible things, right? But we live in a time now which there's this intangible thing that surrounds and pervades our culture. It's on everything we do. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not a thing. It is a thing, but it's not like a precise thing. But you think about what the internet is.
Yeah.
It's out there. So we're talking about science fiction, but monsters being in science fiction. So I was trying to think about which monsters were really good monsters to face against. So one thing I was thinking about, man, Terminator was a tough monster to fight.
Right.
And then I was like, wait a minute, Terminator's not really the monster. The monster is Skynet. Skynet is a monster. The Terminators they're just the minions of the monster. And so it's even more scary now with things of AI and quantum things and time travel. It's like there's a lot more stuff, but just the whole thinking about the AI thing. So back in, when did Terminator come out?
84.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back then, it was a scary, like, ooh, future thing. But now it's like, you know, this stuff is like right here. Like, I mean, the Black Mirror stuff is like right on. That was like, that's pretty looking forward. Skynet is a little bit more scary even now than it was back
airplanes
then.
that fly off programs. You got, you know, we're getting cars. You're getting all this stuff. What happens when the programs start doing what they want to do for the programs? You know, so
Totally.
that's a definitely top notch monster. For, you know, the new technology, I think you can't top Skynet.
Skynet is. Yeah. I mean, Skynet is now.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
One of the monsters which I absolutely think is super frightening and the mythos is amazing was by Clive Barker.
Oh,
And
yes.
I am absolutely fascinated by anything that has to do with the devil, hell, demons, anything like that. No, I don't worship them, by the way, if you're wondering. And, you know, I've got all these Christians who
Do you now, or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
I have, and that means I'm a devil worshiper.
Yeah.
There's a big thing about that, by the way.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love the mythos behind it, and even like in Christianity and stuff like that, the fiction of the I'm about to. I was going to put my mouth there. The fiction of
It's okay.
the,
We talked about the Cthulhu mythos. We can talk about the Christian mythos.
Can we
It's
talk
okay.
about the Christian mythos?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's-
so we'll
it's
talk
okay.
about that. So that whole kind of the devil and all that stuff. Amazing. So Clive Barker, when he wrote Hellraiser, he came out with the Cenobites, and the Cenobites were basically these demons of hell. And Pinhead, who initially wasn't named as Pinhead, he was basically the lead Cenobite. He has all these nails or pins in his head.
Yep.
They made the 1987 film,
so good.
which was so good, super dark. And the thing that made him really awesome is he wasn't a mindless monster. He was articulate. He almost had the kind of this Dracula-esque thing about it.
Yeah.
But he was able to command the forces of hell, and the way that you would be killed, it was in the most horrific ways.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they talk about the flesh and
Yeah,
like being pulled apart and
Such
flayed.
sights to show you.
Yeah, like and the lines and the quotes from it, so good.
Yeah.
Pinhead and the Cenobites and the lament configuration, the cube.
Yeah, and that's what I was when I was doing my list. I was thinking that Cenobites are really good monsters, but I'm like, and Pinhead, he's the best of them. But I'm like, the real monster is the cube.
Actually, if you go into the, because I love Clive Barker, it's the cube actually isn't. It's what is beyond the cube and who the
Yeah,
Cenobites who.
But I mean, it's the thing.
Right.
It's the thing that brings it all
Yeah.
forth.
So I would say, as like the whole hellish and devil thing goes, Cenobites, Pinhead, amazing.
Yeah.
Love it. Super
And
scary.
it's core on different levels. Like it's got the physical torture, gruesome, bloody,
Yeah.
kind of scary thing, and it's also the psychological thing because the mind is a labyrinth.
Kind of like the pre-Saw
mind,
Saw
yeah.
guy, where they really you gotta rip into you as part of the thing. They don't.
Yeah.
You're not just. You're not
But
just
it's on different levels too.
Yeah,
like,
it's like-
that's why The Omen is really good. That's why The Exorcist is really good.
Yeah.
And because it's really that's where it kind of triggers. It
Yeah,
pulls
those
at your
horror movies of that
visceral-
era. I don't know. We'll have to do something on horror movies sometimes
Yeah.
because I don't. Maybe it's just I don't keep up with things as much nowadays. But that might have been a golden age of horror movies.
Yeah, very good. So I would kind of put that in. Pinhead is one of mine. So
Yeah, and the other ones were so good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how about you, Alex? You got anything left here? I got a couple.
I got one more to close it out for me.
Okay,
that I'm
what
gonna
is
talk
it?
About the Gremlins. I think they're fantastic little monsters.
They are
I
monsters.
think that Gizmo, he's my main man, but I think that just that concept of it's a funny little cautionary tale to kind of, I don't know if it's whether to just have your kids learn how to feed the dog and walk it and follow basic instructions, or
Yeah.
that the fact that if you take a cute cuddly little thing and you bring it home and that becomes your life and it just keeps multiplying. I don't know, right? I don't really know where it goes, but it was an entertaining movie.
Yeah.
And it just kind of exploded from there. This little monster that you can't feed after midnight because it'll turn into a psycho killing machine.
Don't get it
or
wet.
or it'll just multiply. We're on a, like I said, planet mostly covered in water. Hey, you're not going to get this thing wet. At some point in his life, it's going to happen.
They're doing a third one.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
2020 coming out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, I think Gizmo and the Gremlins are, they're not heavyweights, but they definitely rank. They're a very cool monster.
Yeah, that was a fun film actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would put the Gremlins in there. And talking about Gremlins, they called this a gremlin, but in Twilight Zone, they have an episode where the original one, I think, the original one is in 1963, stars William Shatner, and the episode is he suffers from a nervous breakdown. He's on a plane, and he opens up his window, and he looks on the wing of the plane, and there's this creature on the wing of the plane, and it's basically trying to destroy one of the engines, and then every time he goes to tell people on the plane, they're like, look out, look out, look out, look, and no one sees it because it hides. And then he closes the thing, and they give him pills, and it's like, no, you're just imagining things. And then he ends up lifting up the window to look, and it's right at the
It's
window.
purposely fucking with them, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And so they call it a gremlin on there, right? Because gremlins are basically, in mythos, are things that basically get into the system and they make things not work, right?
They just kind of slowly make the system fall apart, and
Yeah.
you can't do anything about it. It just, it's just like that ultimate mess,
Yeah.
like it's just all falling apart.
Especially
and
with
you can't
planes, wasn't
stop
it a big thing with fighter pilots?
Yeah, and but so the thing with the Gremlin, and so in 1983 they had something called the Twilight Zone the movie, which is really good. It's like 4 or 5 short stories, and they remade this one, and it was John Lithgow in it, and they kind of made the Gremlin the the animatronics look better. It's scarier. Like in the
Right.
original one, it looks like the guy in the fursuit. Right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so 1983 they do it, and he ends up shooting the window out, and he's like shooting at it, and so basically the plane lands, and he saves the planes, but everyone thinks he's crazy. And they put him. He's in a straitjacket, and they take
Right.
him off, and then as the ambulance rolls away with John Lithgow, they have the mechanics look, and they look at the engine, and they're like, "Holy shit!"
all ripped
And
apart.
there's got these scratch, like these claw
Yeah.
marks and stuff like that. That is a great monster.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So it is a gremlin, but a different gremlin than yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to say, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Black Mirror. If you people are listening to this and you haven't seen all of, well, it's taking a
Any
long
of
time
them.
to watch all of them, but select episodes from those shows going back to the '60s up till today.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff and all. And there's a slew of monsters we could have picked from those.
So Jason, what do you got kind of as we close out here?
Well, I've got a whole bunch of things. I'll just mention some of them briefly because I don't think some of my stuff is a little more obscure, or maybe we haven't all seen it, so it might be harder to.
So why don't you do some honorable mentions here?
Honorable mentions. Let's look at it that way.
Go ahead.
H.P. Lovecraft we talked about before. I would like to mention the Doom that came to Sarnath, one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories. The beings of Ib that come and destroy Sarnath. You got to see that. Did you not see that?
Read that.
Someone please make a good movie about that. Please make a good movie about that.
What else you got?
Beyond H.P. Lovecraft is a great pulp fiction writer, H.P. Lovecraft. Robert E. Howard, mostly known for Conan. He also did a lot of horror stuff. He did tons of other different things, and he does some mythos-related things too. But my favorite, there's a trio of these guys. My favorite is an author called Clark Ashton Smith. Now, he's got tons of different stories. 3 I will recommend for best monsters would be Sephora, the Enchantress of Solaire. Very different kind of monster using beauty as a type of horror.
Okay.
There is the Double Shadow. These are all short stories, very easy to get. You can look them up online, audiobooks, whatever. It's all free because this is stuff from the 20s and 30s and stuff. Double Shadow. If you were an arch wizard, this is the kind of monster that any wizard would be scared of. It has powers that are beyond that you can't stop it. So things are scary to what we can't deal with. The White Worm, Coming of the White Worm, another Clark Ashton Smith. Super scary. Berlim Shikoroth, another great old one.
What else?
Super scary. Those ones there. I mentioned before about the X-Files.
Oh, the
About
X-Files.
that episode when we were talking about They Live. I mentioned an episode with a bug guy that only this one person could see, and then he shot up the place, and then Mulder took on his so Folie du, that episode. Very, very good X-Files Monster of the Week episode. X-Files had their mythos episodes where it followed the alien thing and stuff. Then they interspersed it with these sort of standalone episodes that they're commonly called Monster of the Week. And there's a particular director or writer that did most of them.
There were some
so
good
those
ones.
are very good. And one of my favorite X-Files episodes of all time is from the first season.
Yeah.
It had these green bugs in it, something Darkness or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was near the end of the first season. I thought it was the final episode of the first season. And these bugs get cut out of the. Anyway, I thought Mulder and Scully were dead, and I thought they were getting new actors. It was that scary. I thought, man, this is good. They're killing off the main characters and doing the thing. It was that scary for the things. We just talked about Twilight Zone and Outer Limits. One of my favorite Outer Limits episodes, Sand Kings. It's like basically a double episode, sort of like a movie for the start of the new version of the Outer Limits. Again, bug things. So those are my 2 favorite bug episode movies. And then again, for science fiction, The Shadows and Vorlons in Babylon 5. Great monsters. You guys haven't seen Babylon 5, so we can't really discuss it in detail. But the duality between the Shadows and Vorlon and how they're beyond good and evil, but using law and chaos as a thing to create monsters at a cosmic level in science fiction. Just brilliant. I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure we'll run out of time.
So we've covered a lot. I would say my 3 honorable mentions that I didn't get to, that I would have to say Frankenstein's monster has to be put in there. The original story coming in 1818, and it was first in film in 1910, and then obviously Boris Karloff in 1931 doing the Frankenstein's monster. That's got to be in there as one of the greatest monsters of all time. And 2 other ones we didn't talk about are Darkness, which is from a movie called Legend, which had Tim Curry and had Mission Impossible guy. Why can't I remember his name?
You're asking me
Tom
for an
Cruise?
actor's
Tom Cruise.
name?
Thank
Yeah,
you,
Tom
Tom
Cruise.
Cruise.
Tom
Oh my God,
Cruise.
I don't know
Tom
why that
Cruise.
just so.
I've heard of that
and
guy.
Mia Sarah.
Tried
So
declined to fight from Justin Bieber. That guy, you know. Yeah.
that dude. Yeah. So Darkness, basically the makeup in that was unbelievable. Great villain. He plays a demon, and he's trying to basically stop the sun from rising and cast the world into darkness. I love all that really dark.
Which is what the Mind
Yeah.
Flayers were trying to do.
Yeah,
also.
like I'm really big into dark stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
like my wheelhouse with there. And the last one I want to talk about is one of the greatest monsters of all time in cinema, 1975, something called Bruce the Shark,
Right.
as in Jaws. They called it Bruce, by the way. So the shark, again, I hope they never remake that movie.
Right.
Because that's the problem with Hollywood. They
Yeah.
remake all these things and they
Yeah,
shouldn't, right?
right.
So Jaws, I hope they never touch that.
I think they tried to
1975.
with Giant Shark versus whatever. That's
Oh,
the modern
Megalodon.
version.
Yeah. They have horrible stuff.
Yeah, Shark.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that's
yeah,
why
so
I'm
there's
agreeing
stuff.
with you. That's why they shouldn't try to remake it.
So
'cause
Bruce the
that's-
Shark in Jaws, one of the greatest monsters of all time, just the way it's filmed, the story, everything. So I'm going to put that in my probably top 10 for sure.
100%. You know, and it's one of those things. Again, it's just they don't have to change much. You know, it's just they exist.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
scary. You just
Some
make it a
things
little bigger and
stand up in time.
terrifying.
So this was the monster episode, and we flew through this. We're already an hour and 30 minutes into it.
Because this is monster-sized episode.
We could probably do an episode on one particular monster and keep going like that.
Oh, yeah.
But we were just kind of doing our top 10. We want to know what your top maybe 5 or 10 monsters are of all time. We know that there's so many to touch upon, and there's tons more that we could touch upon, but we just didn't get to it. But we love it. Monsters are what keep us going, and good versus evil. Love it. And this was a whole Dane's Dungeon episode. It was like cool shit.
Yeah, we didn't have room for much bullshit here.
No, it
Yeah.
was mostly cool shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys coming out for this episode. Super fun. And if you have any questions or comments, just leave them for us, and we'll try to get to it. So until the next episode, this was episode 9, The History of Monsters on the Torvus podcast.